Okay, I have a question for you, and I want you to really genuinely think about this for a second. Look at your hand. Just hold it up. You see skin, right? You see veins, maybe a callus or two. You think of it as biology.
Naturally. I mean, it's tissue. It's just organic matter.
Right. But what if I told you that to the Department of Defense and to a very specific group of electrical engineers, that hand isn't just biology? What if I told you it's actually a transmission medium? That the internet isn't just something you access on your phone, but something that is literally running through your fluids and tissues right now.
It sounds completely like the opening monologue of a cyberpunk movie. But if we look at the stack of documents we have today, and honest to God, it is a massive stack, we are not talking about science fiction.
No, we're really not.
We are talking about engineering standards, federal registers, and military directives that are already largely in place.
Exactly. And that is what we are unpacking today. We are doing a deep dive into the concept of biodigital convergence and healthcare 4.0. And I have to say, when I first saw the source list, I was pretty skeptical. I thought we were heading straight into tinfoil hat territory. But then I actually looked at the citations.
It's disarming, isn't it? You kind of expect a manifesto written in crayon,
It's
but
true.
what you actually get is a stack of IE engineering standards, budget allocations for the Cures Act, and technical breakdowns of body area networks.
That's the wildest part. While everyone is looking for sci-fi movie plots like aliens or secret underground bases, they are missing the boring bureaucratic reality that has already been built. So our mission today is to walk through that engineering. We're going to look at how a human body becomes a node on the internet, why the idea of a microchip is actually totally outdated tech, and we'll talk about materials like the stuff in your morning detox smoothie that might actually be helping build this cage from the inside out.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
We'll be throwing some acronyms around like WBAN and IOMT and DODAN, but we'll break them all down so they actually make sense.
Let's start with the architecture. The foundational concept here is the WBAN.
The Wireless Body Area Network.
Now, when I hear network, I think of cables, routers, maybe a blinking server room with heavy air conditioning. How does a biological organism, a human being, become a body area network?
You really have to change your perspective on what a wire is. In a traditional network, you need a transmission medium, something to carry the signal from point A to point B. Usually that's copper wire or fiber optic cable. But the IE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, which is the massive organization that sets the standards for the Wi-Fi you use at coffee shops, they released a standard called IEEE 802.15/66.
IE 802.15.6. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue.
It is not catchy at all, but it is critical. It's a standard for wireless body area networks. And here is the kicker. The standard explicitly treats the human body as the transmission medium.
Because of water.
Because you are full of water, salts, and electrolytes, you are incredibly conductive. This standard is optimized for low-power, high-reliability communication in and on the human body.
So let me get this straight. The signal isn't just flying through the air around me like a radio wave. It's surfing through my interstitial fluids.
Precisely. It's actually more efficient that way. Sending a signal through tissue takes way less power than blasting it through the air where it can get scattered. So in this Internet of Medical Things, or IOMT, your body is the environment where the data flows. You are the cabling.
That is visceral. Okay, so if I'm the environment and I'm part of the internet, do I have an IP address? Do I have a login? How does the network even know it's me?
You have a MAC CID.
A MAC CID. I've seen that term on my router settings at home.
Right. MBase stands for Media Access Control. If you look at the back of your laptop or your smart fridge, there's a sticker with a long string of numbers and letters. That's the MBase address. It's the unique fingerprint of that hardware. It tells the network, I am this specific device and I am allowed to be here.
And the source is claiming that people have these.
Correct. The claim is that in a biodigital network, the human node needs a unique identifier to be tracked and managed. Now, this gets technically nuanced in the documents. Some of these can be permanent linked to a piece of hardware you might have inside you, like a pacemaker or a cochlear implant or a stent.
But others are dynamic, right?
Yes, others are dynamic.
Dynamic meaning they change, like a temporary password.
Exactly. Think of your smartphone as the master device. In engineering terms, this forms what they call a piconet.
A piconet. That sounds incredibly cute for something that feels so dystopian.
It's just a measurement of scale. A pico network is tiny. It's usually defined as one master device like your phone and up to 7 slave devices. Those could be your smartwatch, your smart ring, a biosensor patch on your skin, or something internal. Your phone assigns a temporary MAC ID to your body's network to to manage the traffic between these sensors.
So I'm walking around, and effectively I'm a walking Wi-Fi hotspot, but for my own organs.
You're a mesh network. The sensors talk to the phone talks to the cell tower talks to the cloud. You are simply the first layer of data generation.
This leads us to the biggest correction or maybe re-education that the source material tries to hammer home. I think when most listeners hear surveillance or transhumanism, they have a very specific image in their head.
The spy movie scene.
Exactly. The scene where the hero gets knocked out, wakes up with a scar on their neck, and digs out a tiny metal chip. Or they think of Elon Musk and Neuralink drilling a hole in the skull to plant wires.
The chip narrative is actually a huge distraction. It's old tech. It's 1990s thinking.
You don't need a chip to be tracked.
You don't. Because of that conductivity we just talked about.
Yeah.
The engineering challenge for the last 20 years hasn't been how do we inject a computer into a person. It's been how do we read the biological signals the person is already broadcasting.
Biosignals.
Everything you do generates energy. Your heart beating is an electrical pulse. Your brain thinking is a firing of neurons. Your muscles contracting creates mechanical noise and heat. The goal of this surveillance grid is to read those biosignals remotely.
And how do they do that without touching you if there's no chip inside transmitting what is picking it up?
Radar, LiDAR, and free space optics.
Radar, like air traffic control radar.
Similar principle, but much, much more refined. The sources cite Human Activity Recognition Radar. It uses radio waves to bounce signals off your body. Because you are conductive, you reflect those waves. They can measure the minute expansion of your chest cavity to count your breaths.
Wow.
They can measure the vibration of your skin to get your heart rate. They can even identify you by your gait signature, which is the specific mathematical way you walk.
And this works where? Do I have to be standing in a special security booth?
No. Through walls.
Through walls.
Radio waves pass through drywall, brick, wood, so you could be sitting on your couch, no phone, no smartwatch, completely unplugged, and a sensor array outside or a drone overhead can still read your vitals.
That is terrifyingly invasive. It means there is no off switch. But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here. You mentioned identifying me. Sure, you can see someone is breathing in my living room, but how do you know it's me and not my neighbor who came over to borrow sugar?
Because your biology is unique. We tend to think of biometrics as fingerprints or iris scans, things you have to physically scan. But there is something called the P300 signal.
I read about this in the notes. It sounded like a lie detector test on steroids.
It's similar but for identification.
Mm-hmm.
The P300 is a specific spike in electrical brain activity that happens about 300 milliseconds after you recognize something meaningful.
Okay, give me an example. How does that work in practice?
If I show you a picture of a random house, your brain does nothing. It registers house, but there's no emotional connection. If I show you a picture of your child at home or your mother's face, your brain fires a P300 spike. It's totally involuntary. You cannot fake it.
And they can read that remotely.
The source argues that by using advanced sensors to read these brain responses, or by analyzing the specific flutter of your heart valves, they can identify you as accurately as a barcode.
So they build a profile of you.
They build a digital twin. That's the industry term. It's a virtual simulation of you living in the cloud. It's constantly updated with this stream of data, your heart rate, your stress levels, your location, your neural response times. They don't need to interrogate you to know how you're feeling, or if you're sick, they just query your digital twin.
This feels really heavy. I mean, the technical capability is one thing, but the motivation is another. Why build this? Who benefits from turning the human population into a grid of walking antennas?
The source material boils it down to two main drivers, and they are the two biggest, most distinct sectors of the economy: healthcare and warfare.
Healthcare and warfare. Kind of an unlikely marriage.
Or a perfect one, depending on how you look at it. Let's look at Healthcare 4.0.
Which sounds like a software update I definitely did not agree to the terms of service for.
You probably didn't. But the documents from the CMS, that's the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, are pretty clear. There is a massive push to move away from the reactive model of medicine.
Meaning I get sick, I go to the doctor, they fix me.
Right. That's expensive. That's inefficient. They want remote patient monitoring, or RPM. They want real-time data. If they can monitor your biosignals 204/7, an algorithm can predict a heart attack 3 days before it happens.
Which, again, looking at it optimistically sounds great. I would love to know if I'm about to have a heart attack.
It's the ultimate sales pitch.
Yeah.
Safety, preventative care. But the catch, according to our source, is that this won't remain optional. The infrastructure creates a system where you must be on the grid to receive care. If you aren't broadcasting a MAPI ID, the ambulance doesn't know where you are, and the insurance company won't cover you because you're a high-risk, unmonitored asset.
So it's the golden handcuffs, or I guess the silicon handcuffs. You get safety, but the price is total transparency of your biology.
Exactly. And then you have the military application. This is where we get into network-centric warfare.
The DoDIN.
The Department of Defense Information Network. The military doctrine for the 21st century is that every single asset, tank, drone, soldier, and eventually civilian is a node on the global information grid.
And this is where the source made a really specific correction about Project Looking Glass. I've heard about this on message boards for years. People say Looking Glass is this alien technology that sees the future or a time travel cube.
Please stop image.
You're embarrassing yourselves.
Right. It's not a time machine. It's an airplane.
It is a very grounded, very expensive airplane. Looking Glass refers to the Airborne Strategic Command Post. These are modified Navy E-6B Mercury planes. They are flying data centers.
What do they actually do?
They circle the globe. Their job is to ensure that even if all the ground bases are nuked, the command structure survives. They manage the sensor networks. They are the routers in the sky that connect to all those little MSIDs on the ground.
So while people are fantasizing about portals and timelines, there's a real plane flying overhead collecting data from the sensor grid, which includes us. That is the reality check. The Looking Glass doesn't see the future. It sees the now with absolute clarity because it has access to trillions of sensors. And that brings us to the scale of these sensors. We aren't just talking about watches. We're talking about the Internet of Bio-Nano things.
Bio-Nano, that implies microscopic.
Smaller, molecular. This is where the material science gets really wild. To make a body a better antenna, to make it more conductive, you need materials that bridge the gap between biology and technology.
We always hear about graphene.
Graphene is the celebrity here. A single layer of carbon atoms, super strong, highly conductive. It's great for making soft electronics that can mesh with skin. But the source says graphene is yesterday's news.
What's the upgrade?
Borofene.
Borphine, spelled with a B.
It's a single layer of boron atoms. It's actually stronger and more flexible than graphene. But the key trait is that it interacts beautifully with ions and hydrogen. In a biological environment like a human body that is huge, it makes it a perfect candidate for next-generation biosensors and batteries.
So these materials, graphene, borphine, they are the nuts and bolts of the body network. But here's the part that genuinely made my jaw drop. The host in our source material issues a very specific warning about something called zeolite.
Oh yeah, this is the major plot twist.
Because I see zeolite sold everywhere, health food stores, Amazon, Instagram, influencers. It's marketed as a heavy metal detox. People take it to remove toxins from their bodies.
Right. The narrative is the world is toxic. Take this volcanic mineral, it acts like a magnet and pulls the bad stuff out.
And the engineering documents say what?
They say zeolite is a trap. In the field of synthetic biology and nanotechnology, zeolite isn't a cleanser, it's a scaffold.
A scaffold.
Zeolite has a microporous structure. It's like a tiny honeycomb. Engineers use it to immobilize enzymes.
Okay, immobilize enzymes. Explain that like I'm 5.
If you want to build a sensor inside a liquid environment like blood, you need something to catch the chemical you're trying to read. You need a trap. Zeolite is that trap. It holds biological molecules still so that the nanosensor can read the data.
So the source is arguing that by taking zeolite,
You are swallowing the raw materials needed to build the sensor network inside your own gut. You think you're detoxing, but you might actually be tuning your body to be a more efficient node. You are literally building the cage from the inside out.
that is incredibly dark. It flips the whole wellness industry on its head.
And it's not just supplements. The source mentions smart jewelry. Those resin pendants, orgonite things people buy on Etsy for energy protection.
I've seen these. People wear them to block 5G or cleanse their aura.
But if you x-ray some of them or scan them, they contain NFC coils, near-field communication.
The same stuff in my credit card.
Exactly. The source describes these as beacons. By wearing a conductive coil around your neck, you aren't blocking the signal, you're acting as a repeater. You are strengthening the handshake between your body's network and the external grid. You're tagging yourself.
It's pervasive. It really is. It seems like every exit door is actually just another entrance. And I think that explains the tone of her speaker. She sounds exhausted.
She is frustrated. And specifically, she's frustrated with what she calls the truth community.
Yeah, she went pretty hard on the patriots and the truthers. We should be clear, here we are just impartially reporting what she said, but why does she target them?
Her critique is about focus. She looks around and sees people obsessed with what she calls eschatology, which are end times scenarios. They're arguing about biblical demons or waiting for a savior politician to fix everything or obsessing over partisan politics.
Oh, the engineers are just quietly working in the background.
Exactly. She's saying you are staring at the sky looking for UFOs while a bureaucrat is updating the Federal Register to legally allow your heart rate to be monitored by the Department of Defense.
It's the banality of evil, or not even evil, just infrastructure.
It's infrastructure. It's the Cures Act. It's IE standards. It's budget items. It's boring. And because it's boring, nobody pays attention to it. She's screaming, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a business plan. It is funded by your tax dollars, and it is legal.
That is the most sobering part. So if this is the reality, if we are walking in ice IDs, if the air around us is reading our heartbeats, if the supplements might be scaffolds for sensors, what is the move? What does the source advise? Because move to a cabin in the woods doesn't work if the radar sees through walls.
Her advice is surprisingly analog. It's almost spiritual, but based on biology. She discourages augmenting.
Meaning, don't get the chip, obviously.
Don't get the chip. Don't wear the smartwatch if you don't have to. Don't take the nano supplements like zeolite. But more importantly, she talked about heart fire.
Heart fire?
It's her term for maintaining the integrity of your own nervous system. If the system relies on reading your biosignals, then your defense is to control those signals. She suggests breath work, humming, sound therapy.
Humming? Like just humming a tune.
Humming stimulates the vagus nerve. It calms the nervous system. The source argues that panic, fear, and high-stress states make you louder on the network. A frantic heart rate is a beacon. A calm nervous system is harder to manipulate. It's about being the administrator of your own body.
That makes a lot of sense. If you are a network, you need to have root access. You need to be the one holding the keys.
Precisely. It's about situational awareness. Acknowledge the tech exists. Don't fear it as magic. Understand it as engineering. And then keep your biology as natural as possible.
It's a complete recontextualization of what it means to be connected. We usually think of connection as a choice. I click a link. But this research suggests that connection is becoming a biological state.
We are moving into an era where offline might not be a physical possibility, but a state of mind.
And that leads to a pretty wild thought to wrap up on. We talked about having root access to your own body network, but what happens when that network gets a virus? Not a biological virus, but a digital one. If you have a Mac ID and you're part of the Internet of Medical Things, what does a biological DDoS attack look like? If bad actors can send signals to a pacemaker or disrupt a neural node, could a computer hacker essentially give you a panic attack, or worse, just by pinging your IP address?
That is the ultimate vulnerability of being a node on the grid.
If your body has an AXE ID and your nervous system is broadcasting data like a radio tower, the question isn't, are you online? The question is, who has admin access to your nervous system?
And do you even know the password?
That is the question of the century. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Check your settings, maybe do some breathing exercises, and we'll catch you on the next one.